Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this video. I just want to go ahead and tell you a few things that might help you out. First of all, this is going to be about our Mercury 1999 two-stroke 15 horsepower motor, but there's a lot of others that are going to be quite similar to this make and model, so some of this should be applicable to you. Secondly, check out the description below. I've got everything broken out into chapters, so you can skip ahead to the section that you want or need, whatever is going to work best for you. We're going to be talking about the cleaning of the motor, then we're going to be going into the gearbox oil. The third thing is going to be about the fuel filter, about how to clean it, maintain it. The fourth thing is going to be how to change your spark plugs. Fifth, we're looking into the water pump. We've changed out the entire kit. Maybe you just want to change out the impeller. Sixth thing, lubrication points. 7, mixing your two-stroke oil and gas. The 8th would be the propeller itself. 9th would be using a flush mount kit to flush your water system, and 10th is the internal engine cleaner. Hope you enjoy. All right, so step 1 of this whole process is first I'm just gonna kind of clean it, get all the cobwebs and spiders and things out, and as well as clean up the grease. So if you have any other tips to share with me on how you best clean yours, let me know. I'm gonna be trying baking soda, vinegar, as well as just Dawn soap with water to be cleaning up all the grease and stuff before I go back through and lubricate all the lubrication points. I'm also going to be using my air compressor and shop vac just to kind of clean things out before I get in there with stuff to get the grease out. So we got Angel out here helping to clean now too. We're still working on getting spider webs and grease out. She is using the toothbrush method.
So good.
Which is working really nice. And the baking soda and water is actually doing really well as a degreaser. You know, I'm not trying to really wipe off all the grease, but I am trying to clean it up. That way we can check for anything that's worn or torn, cracked or chipped or scratched. That way we have a better view on what actually needs to be replaced, if anything, other than our basic maintenance we're doing. And yeah, while we're doing this, we're checking electrical wires, we're checking hoses and clamps, and just making sure it's all in good working order and condition. All right, so we're pretty much done with the cleaning process. She's looking really great. I think we got like 90 to 95% of the cobwebs out. Cleaned up the old grease, ready to put on new grease. So she's all nice and shiny, and she's in great condition for a 99. So one thing when you're cleaning, you want to go ahead and tilt it up as well. That way you have a better view of everything, and you can actually take it from side to side to get some of the extra points that would have been harder, you know, if it was just down and straight. All right, so now we're going to do the gearbox oil. So what you're going to need is a flathead screwdriver. You're going to need some of the new seals for your drain screws. You're going to need your gearbox oil and pump, and a rag, and an oil pan. So this job's going to be pretty basic. We're going to take out the bottom screw and then open the top one so it can vent. All the oil's going to pour out in the drain pan. And we're going to put the top screw back in. We're going to pump the oil in, put on your new gaskets. You're done. Okay, so when you're down here by the propeller, we've got a screw right down there and a screw right there. We're going to take the bottom one off first. Oil's going to start coming out. We're going to take off the top one, that way air can flow through and push all the oil out. We're going to put on the new gaskets, pump the new oil in, put the screw back in.
Now for this part you may need to angle the motor some just so you can get to the screw better to be able to get between that and the oil pan.
As the oil's coming out, you really also want to check the consistency of it. Does it have water in it? Does it look like it has, you know, other junk in it? And this bottom screw actually has a magnet on it. And the purpose of that is to catch those little tiny metal pieces that shred off day by day, week by week, month by month. So you want to wipe that off before you put those little metal shavings back in. So now I'm going to open the top screw. It should vent a little faster. There she goes, look at that. So I'm just gonna take the old little gasket sill off because we're gonna put in our brand new one. All right, so when you have your kit, it's pretty simple. Just put it together. Pump goes into the oil container and it screws right on. Nice and easy. And then get your new gasket sills on each of your screws, so those are ready to go. There's the old ones. Being sure to wipe off those little metal pieces before we put it back. Cleaned off all the metal shavings. And we've been letting it drip for about 10 minutes or so, so feeling pretty good that, you know, the old oil's out of there. We changed the angle of it a little bit too, kind of rocked it around. There's still a teeny bit coming out. You just want to make sure you get out as much of the old oil as possible. What we're gonna do is we're gonna attach the pump to the bottom hole, and then we're gonna start pumping oil until we get to the end, and we're gonna attach it to the hole, okay? Then we're gonna pump the oil. It's going to fill up the gearbox this way, and when oil starts to just slowly drip out the top, we know we're full. We're gonna put in our top screw. Then we're gonna get ready with our bottom screw, pull this back out, put that bottom screw in pretty quick. If you filled oil from the top, it would leave more air in there, and we want to prevent that. These things come with a nice little thread on them, so they actually screw right into the hole. Okay, 3 pumps and she started coming out.
That's interesting, it's blue.
Looks green.
Green, blue, aqua.
Oh, there you go. So 19 pumps.
So we're gonna angle this again because we'd known that from doing the oil change that to get the screwdriver in, it needed more of an angle.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad at all. Boom. We changed the gearbox oil just like that. Total beginners. If we can do it, you can do it. Okay, so another one of the projects that you want to make sure you take care of is your fuel filter. So you either want to clean that out or you want to replace that. So let's go ahead and figure out first how to check it. So your fuel filter sits right here. This is it, okay? And this is the housing that's going to hold it. This is the bowl, so we're just gonna unscrew that by hand, and inside of the bowl is the fuel filter itself. When you're checking the fuel filter, you just want to make sure there's no holes in it. I mean, if it's in good condition and you can clean it, just go ahead and do that. You'll want to use solvent to clean that, or you can blow that out with an air compressor or clean it with soapy water and make sure that it's really dry before you put it back together. That's what I've gone ahead and done already. I pulled the fuel filter out a few days ago. I cleaned it with warm soapy water. I let it air dry for a week. And it's gonna be going just right back in. Everything looks in good condition, although it was a little bit dirty in the fuel. You're gonna wanna hold the housing up here as you twist the bowl off. I've gone ahead and just gotten it a little bit loose just to kind of show you. But it literally just unscrews. And then it's gonna have fuel in it. Mine doesn't right now, because I haven't pumped it back yet. But when you bring it out, you want to bring it out really level because it really will have fuel right there at the top. So you want to be careful for that. And then inside the bowl is the filter itself, okay? So I've gone ahead and cleaned mine out. You want to check in your bowl, clean out the bowl. Mine had some gunk in it. So did this inside. Clean all that out. I blew it out a little bit with the air compressor and just cleaned it, dried it, and it's going back together. All right, so the way that this goes back together is, if you can see, there's a ring right up there inside, and this will actually seat up in there like that, and it should stay on its own, and then the bowl will come up and screw around it. But you want to make sure that your filter is up in there like that. You don't just want to drop it in the bowl and stick it in there because it might not align perfectly. Because you want to actually push this up into the filter cover and then put the bowl on, it's really hard to get the bowl on to do it that way. So one thing you can actually do is just remove this area right here. You just have to pull these 2 screws. This is just a Phillips screwdriver, and on the bottom it's just going to use an 8mm wrench on the back. And then this housing will come off, which will just allow you to pull this up a bit, get the bowl in there, tighten that on, and then just put your screws back together. You want to make sure as well that you're checking the O-ring inside your filter bowl. If that needs to be replaced, replace that. If the bowl needs to be replaced, just replace that. All right, now we're moving on to checking the spark plugs. We're gonna go ahead and replace ours because we don't know when they were done last, but you got 2 spark plugs, both covered by a boot here. So the boots just come off like that. And just by hand, kind of twist and pull them. And there's your 2 spark plugs going right into your pistons, your cylinders, right here. And what you want to do is when you pull them out, you actually want to check them. You want to look, how does the top one look? How does the bottom one look? Are they fouled? Are they oily? Are they dirty? As well as looking inside the hole that they go into and checking that out as well, making sure that's clean. So what you want to have handy is we've got our spark plug boot protector as well as our anti-seize lubricant, our 2 spark plugs, and you want to make sure you have the right one. These are NGK. This is the model number you want for a 1999 Mercury Mariner 2-stroke outboard 15 horsepower engine. And these ones have a gap of 0.06. They actually should come pre-gapped appropriately, but it's always good to have a spark plug gap tool to check. Okay, so go ahead and grab your spark plug socket, and you're just going to go ahead and remove both spark plugs. All right, so once you've loosened the spark plugs with your spark plug socket wrench, then you can just twist them out by hand. And again, pay attention to which one comes from top, which one from bottom. So wow, that's pretty dirty. So that's our top one. There's our bottom one. So time for a change. So the reason it's important to pay attention to how they appear, whether it's the top or bottom, if they're both kind of fouled, if they're both equally oily or dirty, then you know that's okay. That tells you something, right? If your top one is nice and clean, but the bottom one's really dirty, you're gonna wanna know that, because that's probably gonna lead to issues on that specific piston. So it just kind of helps give you an indication of how it might be firing. And I don't have the tool yet to do a compression check, but if you have that tool, you're gonna wanna go ahead and do the compression check as well. All right, just because it was really fouled up, I'm gonna spray a little bit of the internal engine cleaner just into the spark plug holes, just a quick little blast. All right, so now we're gonna put in our new spark plug. So we're gonna go ahead and put on some spark plug boot protector inside the boots. It keeps it so the spark plug, the boot doesn't stick to the spark plug.
Oh.
Just get some goop in there. It's gonna get around where it needs to be once you attach the spark plug. All right, now we're gonna get our new spark plug, and we're just gonna check the gap on it just to make sure it's where it's supposed to be. You can buy these anywhere. So yeah, we're at the 0.6 where we want to be. Your manual will tell you what spark plug model you need, product number, and it'll tell you what your gap needs to be on your spark plug. These spark plugs come pre-gapped, which is nice. Most all spark plugs do nowadays, but it's still good to check. And then we'll put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads of the spark plug.
And just wipe off the excess.
Yep. And then you just want to hand tighten these, and then we're just going to make a slight little tight adjustment with the spark plug socket wrench. All right, so now as you can see, both spark plugs are in, and you want to hand tighten them as much as you can hand tighten them, and then go ahead and put on your wrench, and we're just going to tighten them probably about a quarter turn, if that. Yep, there we go, quarter turn. Quarter turn, and we're going to put our boots back on. There they go. Make sure those are seated nice and well. And I mean, you know, while you're at it, just go ahead and make sure your boots and the spark plug hoses are in good condition. If they're not, go ahead and replace those as well. What we're working on doing is we're changing out the impeller, and we're doing that with the entire impeller kit. So the first step that you want to do is you've got the cowl removed. Just back in here where it's really difficult to see, you're going to find a part, this part, which is your horizontal shift shaft lever. And all you're going to need is a flathead screwdriver, and you're going to lift this piece up like that, and then you're going to pull it out. This part right here is the starter, and you want to go ahead and remove this. It's just two simple bolts. You got one there, and then you got one right there. Helps to have the extender on your socket wrench to get to it. But again, just those two 10mm bolts. Go ahead and pull that piece off, because it's going to be a lot easier to get to that part that you need to get to right here. Okay, so there we go with the starter motor removed. And you don't have to pull the wire off or anything. Just have somewhere that you can set it. Mine easily sets right here, at least in this position. This little piece is going to be a lot easier to get in and out if you remove the starter motor. Again, so simple to do. Okay, so what I'm illustrating here is why we remove the starter motor. It's really so you can see this part right here. There's a gap right in this area, and that's where the top of that shift shaft lever is going to come through. And then this pin right here, it's going to go through that hole, and it's going to lock down on that piece right there. So you definitely want to expose this area, make sure you can see what you are doing. The second step is going to be removing the gear housing drive shaft guide. You're going to need 8mm socket and crescent wrench, or this combo wrench. So it's this piece right here you want to go ahead and remove.
That's just under there. Just a little detail. I realized that helped to lift this up, so you might need to just use this with your hand to do that with your hand to be able to get it to where you need it to be to change the impeller out.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we got 3 bolts we got to remove. These 2 on the back here, and this one on the top here. Once we do that, this entire lower unit is going to pull out. When you're getting these 3 bolts out, you're going to need a 13mm wrench. So we're working on our final bolt here. Once we get this out, we can go ahead and remove the lower unit. And each of these bolts has a washer, so don't lose your washer. You got the longer bolt, that one's up front, and the 2 smaller bolts that go on the bottom. Okay, so it takes a little bit of work to get this sucker off, especially if you haven't done your impeller, you know, for the last 3 years. Maintenance says it's due every 3 years or 300 hours on your engine. And we just got this engine last year, so we don't know when it was done last. So we're gonna clean all this up. Your impeller's in here. This is what we're gonna be changing out. This is our method of keeping it upright so we can work on it as we change the impeller. So we're just gonna kind of clean it up a little bit, both in here as well as up in here. And once we get everything back in, all the points that need to be lubricated will be lubricated. But we just wanted to kind of show you what it looks like and how we're setting this up. We're gonna remove these 4 bolts and lift up the housing. So the next step is you're gonna want your 10mm wrench, and we're gonna remove these 4 bolts. Once we do that, all of this is gonna come up, and we're gonna take our new water pump repair kit, which was only $35 on Amazon. Comes with the new housing, comes with the impeller, and all the other pieces for the lower pump housing, and all your gaskets and everything else is in there. Once you get these screws off, okay, then the housing piece is going to come up. And then here's the old impeller. Now on top of the impeller, you've got a washer here, little plastic washer. That thing definitely looks worn. It's quite cracked and stuff. This right here is the impeller, okay?
Oh.
So this part alone, at a minimum, every 300 hours or 3 years, this needs to be replaced. If you look close, it's quite worn. The rubber is just really worn. So definitely time to replace this. Do you see how this one has this spiral look?
Mm-hmm.
But the new impeller, straight. Okay, now you're gonna have this tiny little piece. That's an important piece that's gonna come into play, but you can see this little hole. That's where that's gonna be going. And it just helps hold that onto the rod there, the shaft rod. Helps hold the impeller onto that piece.
So make sure to keep that, guys.
And then we'll have another washer, or just fingernails. So there's that washer. And then the plate, the base plate will come up. And we'll have a new one of these with our kit as well. You can see it's time to change. And you can kind of see how there was a little gasket here. There will be a new one that'll sit on top of this piece before the base plate goes on. And this we're actually replacing as well, because this whole piece came with the new kit, which is really nice. So we have one more bolt to take off. This way we were replacing the entire thing, and it's just nice to have a point of reference of when it was done last. We're actually going to be logging all of this in our maintenance log, because when we took possession of Swiped Right and this motor, there was no maintenance log on it. Seems like overall they took really good care of it, and they definitely did with the boat. So we're very happy about that. But we didn't know when was the last time the spark plugs were done, or their fuel filter was cleaned, or etc., any of the maintenance. Okay, so to get the whole bottom piece off, because with the kit we have a completely new piece that we want to get on. So this does not come off the top. We learned that. You got to pull the bottom piece out, and this will unscrew. So you got to remove this little piece, but keep it, and unscrew this, and it'll slide off the bottom. So we'll just unscrew that off the bottom of the shaft. Okay, so I wanted to make a little note about this. Angel and I talked about this piece, about which way you want it to face, etc. A lot of people pay attention to exactly where this piece is on the threads before they take it off. I unscrewed it all the way and screwed it all the way back on, and that took 19 full 360-degree turns to where it stops. So when mine goes all the way on and stops, that's 19 full turns. And this is the direction everything's going to be facing with this piece. So the slanted part is going to be here, the straight long side's going to be here, and this is how it is with your water pipe, and the shift shaft lever is pointing off that way. Now I'm putting mine all the way till it stops, which is 19 full turns before I put that in. So you can see that here in the manual. This is the lower part of the water pump impeller kit. This big piece here is your gear shaft, and then this is your shift shaft lever here. And they're actually highlighting right here, part B is the shift cam, okay? So position as shown, just like that. Boom, bottom layer, here we go. Peeling off the old gasket. You want to be really careful that you're not knocking junk down in there. We already did an oil change on our gearbox, so that's our fresh new oil. We don't want to pollute that. We do want to clean it off before we put the new stuff in, so just make sure you're wiping away from the gearbox oil. Well, this is where our water comes up, and that is quite dirty in there. You are going to want your lube. Get the Quicksilver Marine Grease 2-4-C with your PTFE. We're just going to put some new grease back down now, and then we're going to put the gasket on top of that. All right, so we have to change this out as well to put this on the new piece. And the new kit comes with your new screw and all the parts you need. So we removed the old rubber seal there. We've got the new one here. Just adding some grease so it'll slide on really nice. There we go, and that just goes up to the top. Stops right there. So we're just using some Q-tips to kind of clean up around here where the water intake pulls up. It was just really bad and we didn't want to push that back down or have that stay in the system. So Q-tips seem to work pretty good and pull up a lot of junk. All right, so this piece, when it's going back on, it should just screw on all the way. And this is the direction that you're gonna want it as it goes back in.
So the longer point goes toward the front of the motor.
Okay, so it's not the hardest thing in the world, but it's also not the easiest thing, and you really want to make sure that everything is being aligned perfectly, because that brass pipe there has to go back into the hole, because that's where your water's coming through. You want to line up all your holes perfectly, make sure your gaskets are staying in, you know, make sure everything's lubed where it needs to be lubed. Okay, so when you're realigning this piece here, your manual should tell you exactly how many inches. You're gonna have 3 options depending on, you know, the year, make, model, size of your engine. Ours is a 1999 2-stroke 15 horsepower Mercury Marina outboard engine, and ours is at 22 inches. So once we've got that back in, you're actually gonna kind of feel it pop into place so you know it's kind of settled. And then we're just checking from the base to the top and we're at our 22 inches. If you need to make adjustments, turn that little screw and then pop it back in place. Okay, so now we're at the point to put the other gasket on. You know, this is locked in place. We've seated the gasket, the lower part of the impeller kit, the metal piece going down in there for the water. So now the gasket's going back on. And that has those little plastic pieces right there and there to kind of help hold it where it needs to be. We've also applied grease in there. New base plate back on, and you want to grease that up too. Okay, now our little washers are going to go on, one before the impeller, one after the impeller. And this one is bi-directional, so it doesn't matter which way it goes. But don't forget your tiny little whatever this is called that sits in that groove right here on the flat spot is where this is going to sit. Okay. This copper tube is the piece that the water is going to go up through this area of the motor, and it had this little rubber piece up top, and the new kit came with the new one. So because the top has this lip here, you got to push it through the bottom section, and then on the bottom of this is where the boot's gonna go. So I'm keeping the old boot. This did not come in the kit, so I just want to clean this up and put it back on the copper pipe. All we have left to do here is get the housing unit back on. So we've added some grease in there just so you understand what's happening. The water's gonna come, you know, up from the bottom intake through this copper tube. It's going to shoot up here. The impeller is going to be spinning around. Water is actually coming up here, and then it's going to come through that little slot, out this hole, up this copper tube, which goes through there, up towards the motor. So, that back on. Okay, so I'm just trying to bend the impeller pieces around because otherwise the housing sits on it flat, which you don't want. Okay, so as you're tightening the bolts back down, you want to make them about till they're snug, and then maybe an extra quarter turn. But you don't want to go too hard because this is a plastic piece right below the metal base and everything. So if we tighten these too much, we can end up cracking the piece that we just put back on. We certainly don't want to do that. So snugly tighten all of the 5 bolts back in. So I brought the motor into the garage so I could actually much better show you inside of here. Okay, so here's the motor on the mount, so you know where we're looking. This is where the lower gear housing is gonna go back on. And you wanna understand what all these holes are doing up in here. So the one on the very bottom of the screen there, that is where the shift shaft is going to go through. So you can see the light actually comes out of that bottom hole. The light comes out right there because that's where that piece is going to be running. The gear shaft, this one here, goes through that main center hole, and the water pipe is going to be coming from here. Okay, that's your copper tube. Okay, so your water pipe's going to go in the upper left hole. So the one on the upper right, I don't know yet what that does, but over there on the top left, that's your water pipe. The middle one, that's for your gear shaft. And then the one there on the very bottom in the center, that one is for your shift shaft. All right, so here's a view of the water pipe placed back in. And it's not the easiest job, but it's also not the hardest job to do. But there you can see it is in the top left hole. You want to make sure that little black rubber seal is on top of the pipe. And it has to go into another hole after it goes through that first one. There's going to be another one, and you have to make sure it goes in the right one. Otherwise, you could end up putting it back in where the gear shaft has to go, and that's not going to be good. You do want to put the water pipe back in there. Now, if it doesn't come out, that's good, that's fine. That actually made it a pain in the butt when it came out for us because we had to figure out how to put it back in. But if it comes out, you want to put that in first because it'll just be too difficult if you put it on the lower unit and try to shove all 3 of those tubes in at the same time. You want the water pipe in first. Also, while we're here, this just appears to be an exhaust port. All up in there is just full of all kinds of nastiness. Not going to bother with it this year. Maybe next year into this sailing season, I will pull the entire motor apart even further to kind of clean things out and get to know it a little bit better. But for right now, not worrying about it. Also, just as a note, I did clean out in here a little bit. We had quite a few dead spiders and bugs and spider webs. So I just made a quick little cleaning tool. I taped a rag to the top of a stick and just kind of cleaned out up inside of there to get that to where I could actually see the holes in what I was doing. All right, so I just wanted to show a better view of kind of what's going on here with everything. So right here, sorry, as you can see, there's the propeller, okay, of the lower unit. So this way is the front and this way is the back. And up here, this is your gearbox oil. So we've already changed that. So that's just a chamber full of oil. This side is gonna be more just exhaust. It just kind of looks gunky and crummy and dirty in there, but that's not a huge deal. But what I wanted to show you is this hole right here. That hole is where your copper water tube goes down to. So the water literally is coming up from your lake or ocean or river or whatever, coming up right here into your water impeller unit. And there's a little rubber gasket seal right there in that hole. So if you need to replace or check that one, go ahead and do that as well. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about this clear adhesive sealant. You can see there it says silicone RTV. Now right here in the manual, page 6-4, RTV silicone, okay? And it shows it right here going on the back of the lower impeller unit as that lays down. Okay, again, I just wanted to get some really good video clips of this to really illustrate what's going on. So you can see the little clamp there on the shift shaft lever there piece, and then you can see the water tube getting ready to go into position. And this piece here, look at how it's faced. Again, mine is screwed all the way to the top. So as we've brought it down a little bit further, we've got the water pipe aligned to where it goes. And I've got the RTV sealant, which is gonna go right back up here. I'm gonna put a little bit on the bottom back sides here where it seats down. And then it's gonna cover this top section with a bead. There we go, now we're down all the way. The water pipe is in. There's just these tiny little dabs of RTV sealant on the back part, bottom part of this. A gasket and all the holes are lined up appropriately. So now we're just gonna take the RTV sealant and apply right across the top here. And when I pulled the old unit out, you know, there was a big dried gunk of this stuff, and it doesn't prevent you from pulling this back off. So you don't have to worry that it's like that tough of a sealant, but it is gonna be waterproof. And you can cut off the excess after it dries. You can cut off the excess with like a knife, so that should be good. All right, now this tiny little piece, this is called your key assembly, and there's a flat part right down here, and you don't want to lose this. This piece I thought came with this kit, but it does not, so be very careful. If your kit doesn't have that key assembly piece, don't lose it. That's what actually holds your impeller onto the gear shaft there and allows it to spin, okay? So don't lose that. Okay, now when you've got the impeller put back in, the lower part of the water pump impeller kit is down, you got the housing on top, and you gotta get those 4 bolts back in there, as well as your 5th bolt right back in there. What you wanna do before you put those in is you wanna add some Loctite to your threads on the bolts before you put them in. And that just helps because obviously a motor has tons of vibrations that are going on all the time, and the Loctite helps those bolts to not just reseat out of place. So I'm using the blue 242. This one here, you see it says removable. There are Loctites that you can buy that will make it so it's non-removable, and you don't want that. You want to be able to get this back off later. All right, so probably an easy way to remember which Loctite you want. Blue 242. It always makes me think of like being a kid playing football. Blue 42, say hi. And it is blue. So we're just gonna put that on the threads, and then we're gonna go put it where it goes. All right, so there she is all put back together. All 5 bolts have Loctite. Copper tube is in. You're gonna have this piece here. Looks like it's threaded, but it's not. It's almost a little bit cone shaped, a little bit skinnier up at the top. So that part just sits there. And it is gonna be pretty loose, but once the water pipe comes in, it's actually gonna put pressure on it, so that'll hold that in place. You don't have to worry about that too much. Again, your shift shaft lever's gonna be pointed out this way before you put it back in the lower part of the motor. And you'll notice that this, when you push down, it's gonna kind of make that click pop sound. That's what you want it to do. We are fully ready to put this back together. Again, there is your RTV sealant placed there. Not the most beautiful job, but that should cure over the next 24 hours. And the Loctite cures in 10 to 20 minutes and being fully cured in 24 hours. Okay, pretty much the last step before we put this piece back together is right here. You just want to go ahead and add some of your 2,4-C marine grease so that this part is lube. This is one of your lubrication points. So do that before you start putting the lower unit back together. All right, well, Angel's not here and I want to get this done, so I'm gonna go ahead and try to put the lower unit back on. Again, the water pipe's in. I've been pushing on it pretty hard, just trying to make sure it's really snug. And now I just gotta line up the other two, the gear shaft and the shift shaft as they go into their appropriate holes that I've already explained. And then we'll just put the 3 bolts back on. So make sure you have your long bolt that goes up front and your 2 shorter bolts that go in the back. I cleaned these with some WD-40 just to kind of, you know, brush them off and get some of the old rust and stuff off. And I'm gonna put some Loctite on them before I put them back in as well. Now remember, these bolts were 13 millimeters, so get your socket wrench ready, or your box wrench, or your crescent wrench, or whatever you're using. Get that ready as well, 13 millimeter. All right, living on a prayer, here we go. Let's try this out. Okay, so my shift shaft lever has made it through. It's on its way up to that section behind the starter motor where we want it to be. The gear shaft has aligned, and I'm just getting the water pipe into the boot. Oh no, that's the water pipe moving. Which I don't want to happen. Okay, so that sucks. I don't want that to happen. This water pipe's a pain in the ass. For real. It just wants to come out. All right, so day 2. I wasn't able to get that in yesterday. The water pipe kept falling out. So what I did was I took some RTV sealant and I put it on the little, just a little bit of it around the rubber seal at the top of the water pipe. And then I put the water pipe in the hole and I let that cure overnight. So I'm hoping that'll just keep that water pipe in place. It shouldn't affect any water flow or anything else. There's really not a lot of that sealant, just enough to hopefully hold this in place while we get this put in. If this doesn't work, we have Angel here today as a backup plan. I do believe that water pipe is connected well. There we go. Look at that. All right, you can see right down there, that is where our shift shaft lever's coming right up in that groove where we want it, so that we can get that pin back in. So now that the lower unit's put back together, the shift shaft lever's lined up in that groove, ready for the pin to go in. The gear shaft's in place, the water pipe's connected. I'm gonna go ahead and put the bolts on the lower unit. I'm gonna put some Loctite on the 3 bolts and then go ahead and get those inserted and tightened up. Then I'll put that pin lever back in. Then we'll be able to put this piece back on the shift shaft lever. That keeps it from going the wrong way. Then we should be able to lower the motor. All right, so the lower unit has been put back on. We got this lower bolt. We got this lower bolt. And we have this lower bolt. So those 3 have been put back on. Also got this little piece put back on, so don't forget that. It holds this part up. I might have to make a quick adjustment. And now we just got to get this sucker put back on for the shift shaft lever. All right, I moved into some better light here so that we can show again what we're doing. So this section right here is where we're focusing. If you can see, the shift shaft lever comes right up into here, right in this groove. So now we just have to get this pin put back into that hole. All right, there she is. Got her back on. Just took a tiny little bit of finagling, but that little lever is now back on, which is great. So next step, just putting the starter motor back in. And when I'm doing the starter motor again, I'm just gonna put some Loctite on the threads, put the bolts in, and we're good to go. Just like that, the starter motor's back on. Just those 2 bolts. All right, here on page 1B-6 of the manual, it talks about the lubrication points. So this is a step you don't want to forget. You are gonna need a grease gun. A lot of these are gonna be your Zerk fittings for your grease gun. So number 1, it talks about the tilt tube, lubricate the fittings right there, okay? That's the first picture on the left. And then number 2 says transom clamp screws. It wants you to lubricate the threads. So you don't need the grease gun for number 2, but you do need it for number 1. And I'll show you where those fittings are. Okay, so these 2 Zerk fittings right here on the front, you want to put your grease gun on those 2 and load those up. And then you want to do the threads on the transom clamp screws. All right, here we go. So number 3 is going to be your swivel bracket. This one's also a Zerk fitting, and that one is right there. Okay, and number 4 is the steering friction adjustment shaft. This is going to be on tiller handle models, which we have. And you can't see this one until you tilt the motor up, then it reveals itself. So there's your 4th Zerk fitting right there. The non-Zerk fittings where you don't need a grease gun is just your threads on the transom clamp screws. And then most of the areas around here where the pins are latching in to hold your motor at various angles. You kind of just want to lubricate along this track area, as well as those pins that go in and out of these tracks. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about 2-stroke fuel and oil mixing. So the container here on the left, this is the one that goes on the boat. So there's maybe a gallon of fuel in there. It's been sitting in my garage all winter with the vent cap closed to prevent condensation, which means water in your engine's bad. So anyway, this has a oil gas mixture already for about 1 gallon. This is a 5-gallon tank that I keep as a reserve. Right now this is simply fuel. There's no oil in this one right now. It needs oil, so we're going to do that. But about the type of fuel, you want ethanol free fuel. So don't just get your regular gasoline. It's going to have some sort of ethanol in it, or methanol, or something like that, at various percentages. You want to get ethanol free. So this is an 88 octane ethanol free gasoline. And then we have our 2-stroke marine engine oil, the synthetic blend from Quicksilver. It's the premium plus 2-stroke. And then we have an oil gas mixer. All right, so you definitely want to confirm with your manual, with your year, make, model of your motor. This 1999 Mercury 2-stroke 15 horsepower runs a gas oil ratio of 15:1 after the break-in period. Now this is a 1999 motor and the year is 2021 as of the recording of this. We are well past the break-in period, so 50:1 is what we want as our oil gas ratio. And that's why you want to get something similar to this. I bought this on Amazon. I believe I bought it on Amazon. If I didn't, you can get these on Amazon. And the nice thing about it is what you can do is find your ratio. So here we have a 50:1 ratio. So it's going to give you liters or gallons. And then you just have to find the right amount that you're putting in and match that up with your oil. Okay, so my fuel tank that goes on my boat is 6.6 gallons. That's its capacity, which is also 25 liters. So here, since I want a 50:1 ratio, I've got 25 liters, that's the very top, and then you see 6 gallons here on the right side. So 6.6 gallons is going to be right up there with my 25 liters. So if I have my 6.6 gallons of fuel in there without oil, then I put the oil, I fill this up with oil to 25 liters or 6.6 gallons. But this one's good. So what I want to do is I want to mix here in my portable tank that I port over to my other portable tank. This is a 5-gallon tank. It's 5 gallons. So what I want to do is I want to find the 5-gallon mark on here, which is right there. And that's where I want to fill my oil in this. Now I will pour all that oil into there, mix it up. Now this is good to dump into here. All right, as you can see, here's the 50:1, which goes with my motor. And I've got the oil at the 5-gallon mark. So I'm just gonna pour this in the gas tank and then mix it up. All right, when you're looking on your fuel line so that you can connect all of this properly, you'll have an arrow. So that's telling you the direction the fuel is going. So if we follow that arrow, then that's the end we want to plug into the motor. The one we want the fuel to come from, obviously, is our gas tank. So this one here, we're gonna plug in You can see they have this pushable latch here on each end of the fuel line. And what that does is it has a spring in there so that it can clip onto the longer, bigger, thicker copper, brass, whatever piece to hold it in place. And then the other one's gonna connect to that little pin. There we go. It just makes that little click. So you're locked in place. All right, now out here with the motor, we got the other end of the fuel line. And again, we have a little clip. So that side's gonna go on this piece here so that the other part can go on that pin. There we go, and it just makes that little click, tiny little tug, and it's locked in place. So here's the setup. We got the fuel tank, bringing fuel into the motor. Now what we wanna do is we wanna pump this bulb until we can't really pump it anymore. So once it's nice and firm, you've got your fuel line pumped full of fuel up to the motor. And again, remember, it's gonna come up the tube into the fuel filter where it's filtered, preventing any bad stuff from going through. And then it's gonna go through this hose into your carburetor. Okay, so our next order of business here is removing the propeller. We want to do that because we want to put on that flush mount kit so we can kind of flush the cooling pump a little bit better with just clean fresh water. And we also want to lube up the propeller shaft that the whole propeller spins around. So we're going to need a 15mm wrench, and we're first going to take off the first nut right here, so the propeller nut, and then right behind that is going to be the propeller hub. So those two are going to come out, and then the propeller is going to come off. There's going to be a piece right behind that, and then it's got to go back in the same order. So basically 4 parts are going to come off, 4 parts are going to go back on. Alright, so this is the flush mount kit that you're going to need. I've already provided the part number and everything on this, but this is the style needed for this specific make and model, this year and everything on this motor. Some of them will have the muffs that go on the side. It really just depends on where your intake is, but this one here is down here on the bottom, so this flush mount kit has to go up here, which is why the propeller has to be removed. All right, so I've connected the garden hose. Now we're just gonna slip this thing on. There we go. Now it's ready to turn the water on so that it can run through the water pump and really flush it out with nice fresh water. And once we're done with that, then we'll go ahead and grease off this propeller shaft and put the propeller back on, and then we're ready to roll. We got really good water out this telltale on the bottom, as well as this one over here on this side. But we're not getting a ton of water out of this one. Not sure why. Okay, so we tried the flush mount kit. I don't like it. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I don't know, but it didn't seem to work very well. Was not getting a lot of water out of the top telltale. And of course, you don't want to run your engine very long or at all without having nice cool water running through. So we're gonna go ahead and put the propeller back on, but first we're gonna grease the propeller shaft with our 2,4C, and we're gonna get the propeller put back on, and then we're gonna put it back in the bucket and run it and flush it out really well. So your first step is gonna be grease the shaft, and I'm just gonna grease this whole thing, but you don't want to get it on your threads, so clean that up a little bit. So once you have your new grease on there, first you're going to take your forward hub and get that put on. Okay, so it's going to go on this way right here, and then the propeller is going to go back on. You can actually see this groove in here where that piece, the forward hub, actually kind of seats in there really nice. So there's that. And then we have our reverse hub goes on this way. And these little pieces, they look like they seat right on the shaft. So that goes in. And then the propeller nut is the last piece. And again, that's a 15mm wrench. And once we have this on all the way, we are going to put it back in the bucket and run it again so we can really flush out all the smoke from the internal engine cleaner. So just like pulling it off, when you put it back on, you need your block of wood, which is going to stop the propeller from turning. And just tighten the propeller nut, and we're good to go. All right, that should do it. We got it all set up, we got it running, that's great. We've been letting it run for about 15 minutes now. And what we're gonna do now is clean out the carburetor, right? So we have the Quicksilver Power Tune internal engine cleaner. Other chemicals similar, the fogging chemicals. This is gonna do the same thing. It's gonna clean out all those deposits in the carburetor all the way through to the spark plugs. So after it's done, we might need to pull out the spark plugs and clean them off as all the gunk's blowing that way. So this is our first time doing this, but we're gonna give this a try.
Smoking is normal on this. It's gonna be burning off all the chemicals. And you wanna spray it until it starts choking and let it recover a little bit.